Welcome to the first ever White House Digital Assets Summit. Last year, I promised to make America the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we're taking historic action to deliver on that promise.
Your administration is moving at tech speed.
We are going to keep the U.S. the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stable coins to do that.
Technology is at the foundation of the Trump presidency.
This is truly a historic day, and as a crypto founder, I couldn't be more proud to be part of your administration.
No one in this room could have envisioned this just a couple years ago.
We want to stay at the forefront of everything. This is a big day. Being in the White House is a big deal, and you have great support. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing great today. Now, I do know that the market sentiment right now, or actually for really the past month, has not been that great in crypto. But again, I think a lot of it has to do with possible over allocations to speculative altcoins or meme coins, right? If you're just holding Bitcoin, it's not that bad, really, considering things that we have seen in the past. I mean, just to sort of put this all into perspective, Bitcoin having a 30% crash is quite normal, actually, for the asset. I mean, this happened 5 years ago, just to put things into perspective. Bitcoin is not even down as much as this COVID crash that we had, which was insane. Like Kevin Svensson pointed out, we had a 40% crash right here in a day. So a 40% crash in literally one day with a 65% overall drawdown from top to bottom. And I was there for that. And yeah, it can definitely be scary to see these types of swings. Now, you're probably not going to see these kind of 50% crashes in a day anymore. We have a lot more institutional interest in Bitcoin. There's bigger players. It's a higher market cap overall. But just to put it into perspective, it does seem bad, but it always seems terrible when you're going through it, right? Once you've been through a few cycles, you learn to sort of brush these things off. And actually, the opportunities that people scream that they wish they could buy cheaper, when those opportunities present themselves, it's the same people that won't buy, or they'll be panic selling, right? Which is just the total opposite of what you should be doing. If we actually have a look at what's going on right now, yeah, you can say that for sure we are now officially in a downtrend. That's not for debate, right? We are putting in lower highs and lower lows. I do think that this is starting to look a bit like a descending wedge, which, by the way, does have about a 70% chance usually of breaking to the upside. The interesting thing is that we actually have found support right here. We had a parallel channel that was acting as both our support back here as well as our resistance, and currently we have found support on that level. However, if we were to break below this, the major key of interest is this area right here. Look at how many attempted breakouts Bitcoin had in this area. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe you can count this one as 6, 7 fake out, and finally on the 8th try we broke out. So a lot of times markets want to retest this area. There wasn't a lot of really anything going on in the middle, so we usually, more often than not, we do come down to test that, right? So that does put a possibility maybe of seeing a $72,000 Bitcoin possibly, right? But that still would be maintaining the uptrend. Now, I can understand a lot of people being concerned. We had this big news about the strategic reserve. Why did the price not explode after this? Well, if you just look historically, a lot of these tend to be the buy the rumor, sell the news type events, but the events themselves usually take time. Like, let me just give you an example, okay? So this area right here, you may remember, this was literally on the actual day that the ETFs went live, right? And so, Bitcoin had been running up to that point. We had this massive candle that opened. We went up about 7%. And then from that point, we came all the way down about 16%. Now, if you want to take that from the top of the candle, and this was the day that the ETFs launched, okay? We had literally in less than 2 weeks a 21% correction to the downside. Now, you can imagine that when this happened, I don't know if you were around, people were saying, you see, obviously this was nothing to be excited about. These ETFs don't mean anything. It was a sell the news event. Look at the price crashing 20%, biggest news we had at the time. And, if you just zoom out, this was the crash, right? And let's zoom out. And here's where we are now, guys. So, I mean, you have to kind of take this with a grain of salt and realize that these little corrections, I mean, yes, this is a much larger correction compared to this correction right here, but overall, the percentages aren't that far off. I mean, right now, we're down about 25%, right? Bitcoin is notoriously known for these 30% corrections. So I'm just trying to put that into perspective. We obviously had the CPI falling, which was 0.1% lower than what they were expecting. So this could mean that maybe, having an outlook that the Fed might be looking to cut rates a little bit sooner. There's also these like conspiracies, or maybe they're not conspiracies, that maybe Donald Trump is intentionally trying to cause some temporary damage, in order to force the Fed's hand. Now, I'm not going to get into the economic technicals of that. That could be a possibility. Who knows, what the master plan is. But one thing that you can't ignore is the global, M2 supply, right? Which has been steadily increasing, and Bitcoin tends to have a lag, right? According to Raoul Pal, you're looking at about a 10-week lag, but you can see that there is a lot of correlation. And right here, there seems to be major disparity. As we're going up, what's going to happen? Money printer gets turned on, right? Ultimately, the Fed will start cutting rates. And even though it can seem depressing right now, if you look historically, the fact that we were in a tightening cycle, okay, where the rates were high, and Bitcoin was able to not only break its previous all-time high, but go above 100,000, even if it was just briefly. If you have that patience, if you can stick this out and realize the opportunity of accumulating right now, when the inevitable does end up happening, you're going to be really happy that you took that leap of faith, essentially, which really, when it's with Bitcoin, we're not really talking about a leap of faith. But what we can see is that we did close the CME futures gap. And it's crazy because when we had this on February 28th, we didn't quite close the gap, and I was skeptical about that. And as you can see, we did, in fact, definitely 100% close it. And since then, we have stayed above it, which I do find quite interesting. There also is another small gap at around 84,790. So yeah, I mean, the likelihood of at least having a retest up to around that area sooner than later is quite possible. Ultimately, though, it still is just maintaining an upward sloping trend. But again, I love this infographic because it's like Bitcoin at 16,000, no one's interested in buying, right? Bitcoin at 100,000, everybody's lining up to buy. Now, obviously, this is a very extreme, we're talking about basically the cycle bottom to where we went, but it just feels that way all the time. Everyone wants to jump in on these opportunities to get more Bitcoin, to accumulate, to have a better position. And when the opportunities present themselves, you tell yourself you're going to do this, and then you don't do it, and you freak out. Or, you think you're going to buy lower. You could buy lower, but we're already at like a 25% discount. So for people that were excited about buying Bitcoin at 100,000, you should be extra excited about buying at these levels. So we're going to talk about a few things today, clarify a few things that might have been a little bit confusing. A couple things to go over is if you guys are trading over on Blowfin, if you do use the link below, they have a spinner right now game, basically anything over every 10,000 in pretty much volume, which isn't really that hard to achieve if you're using leverage. You can either win a MacBook Pro or AirPods or some other prizes. They have that going on for 12 days. And I wanted to also mention Levex, guys. Levex is a really awesome up-and-coming exchange. I actually know the founders of Levex, and I've known them for years, and they're really great, legitimate people in the space. And what's really cool about this exchange is they have a social media type aspect to it. So if you wanted to, for example, if you search up here, you can actually search, zombie or crypto zombie, and you can see here I am right here. And if you click on this, this takes you to my personal profile. And I actually post things here that you necessarily can't find on my videos, right? Or sometimes if I'm traveling, and I'll post a little more technical setups in here, things like that. So if you guys are interested, you can use the link below to join. It's absolutely free. That is for Levex, and you don't have to trade. You don't have to deposit money. But if you use my link, that gets you instant access to all of my content for when I'm traveling or I'm not around. So I would highly suggest that, especially if you want more technical content, whereas these videos tend to be a little bit more maybe news related with, a little bit of technical. So just going to throw that out there for anyone who wants to know a little bit more about what I'm doing, what I'm looking at technically. So Moving on, as far as the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is concerned, there was a lot of confusion about exactly what it meant specifically, but really it wasn't a bad thing about Bitcoin. They're going to hold on to what they have. The altcoin stockpile could potentially be sold, so that's something to keep in mind, but they are looking for ways to acquire. Here's actually straight from the horse's mouth.
So we have the reserve and we have the stockpile. So the reserve is just Bitcoin. The goal is long-term preservation. Think of it as like a digital Fort Knox for digital gold. We want to keep it secure. We never want to sell it. That's the goal of the reserve. At one point in time, we had about 400,000 Bitcoin on the federal balance sheet. We sold roughly half of that for something like $360 million. If we had held all of that, just that portion we sold would be worth over $17 billion. We don't want to make that mistake with regard to the rest of it. We think there's around 200,000 coins left on the federal balance sheet, but the truth is that nobody knows because we've never done a proper audit. So part of what this executive order provides is that we're going to do for the first time a government-wide accounting of the digital assets that we actually have. That's Bitcoin. Okay, so then you got the stockpile. The purpose of the stockpile is responsible stewardship. It's a place for safekeeping. It's a centralized, you could say, account under the direction of the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of the Treasury will figure out how to maximize the values of these holdings. Now, there's a couple of important differences between stockpile and reserve. So one is we're prohibited from selling the Bitcoin. There's no such prohibition with respect to the stockpile. If the Secretary of the Treasury decides that it's in the long-term interest of the U.S. to rebalance the portfolio or change the portfolio, the Secretary has the discretion to do that. There's one other important difference between stockpile and reserve. So with respect to reserve, the EO provides that the secretaries, and I'm talking about Treasury and Commerce, they're allowed to figure out strategies to accumulate more Bitcoin for the reserve if those strategies are budget neutral and don't cost the taxpayer anything.
And again, the same way that the ETF, it had an initial crash, it took 6 to 8 months to really gain some traction. But the thing that you have to consider, like Mr. Crypto points out, is that yes, we have a strategic reserve passed on a federal level, but now it's only a matter of time before states approve their bills. When the first state starts buying Bitcoin, it's going to become a massive domino effect. And I think this is very true. It's just, you got to wait for that first person to dip their toes in, right? Same thing with the billionaires, Henry Tudor Jones and all these guys, or Paul, whatever his name is, not Henry, Paul Tudor Jones, sorry. A lot of times these bigger institutions, or specifically states, right? They might want to do a wait and see approach, see who's kind of going to dabble in it. And then once, all it takes is one, right? And then that's the spark that ignites the giant fire. So, for example, you have New Market Capital CEO saying that the government could issue $2 trillion of Bitcoin-backed bonds to buy up to $200 billion worth of Bitcoin. We'll actually get more. I'll do a little bit more on that later. And we also had Cynthia Lummis reintroducing her bill about buying 100 million Bitcoin. There's a few different tweaks this time around, and she says that they even kind of have Trump on their side.
And this is so exciting, and I wish everybody could catch the same fever for the future of America and what Bitcoin brings to it that we all have. I'd like to announce that we will be reintroducing the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve today, the Bitcoin Act in the Senate. So far, original co-sponsors are Tuberville, Blackburn, Marshall, Sullivan, Marino, and Justice. We have a couple more feelers out for original co-sponsors today, but the House as well, through Nick Begich, has 6 original co-sponsors. The momentum is in our hands, and we need to make this happen. Thankfully, President Trump is with us, and the opportunities are boundless.
So it's definitely, for me, difficult to be bearish, longer term or even medium term. Short term, yeah, we could have a little turbulence the same way that we always do. But it's not even just the things you're seeing with Bitcoin. You have Abu Dhabi's MGX backing Binance with a $2 billion investment. This is the largest investment into a crypto company and the largest investment ever paid in stable coins, right? So this is just showing that, people are opting out of the traditional system. And just talking about these sort of market cycles, I'm not saying that maybe this time is or isn't different. I'm not saying that we're going to have a perfect 4-year cycle. But, if you just look at the historical patterns, you do tend to have this growth period followed by the bubble, right? Which is massive hockey stick, just straight to the moon. And then you have your bear market. And this tends to continue over and over again. And if we zoom into what we're doing right now, we would essentially be at the right at the start of all of these sort of yellow bubble territories. So, for people saying that this is the top, then this is just like either the shortest or most disappointing or, I don't know, most manipulated cycle I've ever seen. And it would really be disappointing. And it would be very unlikely considering most of the overheated, oversold, overbought, signals that we're used to seeing, we're not actually seeing at this moment in time. And I wanted to just, I like to remind people about the bigger picture. This is a great clip from Mark Yusko talking about Bitcoin back when it was only about $8,000. And I believe this is when it had the massive, crash down. And yeah, he was talking about this at $8,000. And the way that they were looking at him were like, are you crazy? That's kind of how I feel now, except we're at $80,000 instead of $8,000. And what happens when we're at $800,000, right? Imagine... This is a joke, actually. People used to joke that years ago about, oh my God, did you see Bitcoin is crashing? It fell from 100,000 to 70,000. And the meme has actually come true today. And people are bearish. This thing has massive potential.
Before we go, Bitcoin was under 8,000 earlier today.
Buy it.
Regardless, though, of the drop. If I said to you Bitcoin dropped to 5,000, you'd say buy it.
Buy it. Because here's the thing. The daily price of Bitcoin doesn't matter. It's been alive for 10 years. In every year, other than 2015, it's made a higher low. The market cap has grown every single year. Every fundamental indicator of Bitcoin, usage, wallets, block size, transaction size, number of transactions, every single one, hash rate, making new highs. All of the indicators of the network and the network value are rising. The price of any asset fluctuates. Let's take Amazon. Amazon's been a public company for 20 years. In every year, including this year, it's at a double-digit drawdown. The average peak to trough, minus 31%. Twice, minus 90%. When was the right time to sell? Never. Who's owned it since the IPO to today? Jeff and his mom and dad. That's it.
All right. We're going to leave it there, Mark.
All right,
Good to
thanks.
see you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
Mark
me.
Yusko, Morgan Creek Capital.
Outcast.
15 years, 15, 16 plus, whatever it is that Bitcoin, I've lost track at this point. That's not a fad. I grew up in mostly the 90s, but I was born in the 80s. I'm old. Yes, I'm an old guy. You can define the 80s, right? You think of the 80s, the hair metal, the neon colors. Then you think of the 90s. It's very like sort of grungy, whatever. You got the 2000s, right? They all have their fads, things that come and go. Fads don't tend to last 16, 17, going into 2 decades. Bitcoin has been around for well over a decade and a half. So, I would definitely rule out Bitcoin as a fad. It's actually quite still in its infancy, although many people think that they're late to the party. They're really not when they consider the amount of global money just everywhere, just derivatives and real estate and forget it, the endless money printing that governments just do no matter what. I mean, yeah, we're trying to get inflation down to 2%. Okay, but at the end of the day, it's still inflation. After 10 years, it's still inflation. It's not deflation, right? So you need to find that hard asset. And Vivek Ramaswamy was talking about how every government and company is probably going to eventually end up holding Bitcoin.
Going to be a seismic step forward to say that even though the volatility of an asset like Bitcoin is obviously much greater than that of U.S. Treasuries, so too has been the rate of return on Bitcoin over the course of the last 10 years compared to those Treasuries. For the higher risk, higher return stratum of where you measure what your hurdle rate is for your rate of return on a project, I believe Bitcoin will emerge as that new standard. And if you believe that, as I do, I think that makes for probably the most compelling case for any institution, governmental to non-governmental, to for-profit to non-profit, holding some level of a reserve of Bitcoin. It helps to be bullish on it for the long run because you believe that asset's going to appreciate. But what it does is it tethers your institution's behavior under conditions of capital scarcity to something of fixed supply that has a fixed store of value that's likely to go up over the course of time. That is a different case for actually holding Bitcoin, even if you're a corporation. So we're talking about this at the level of the national stockpile or the National Strategic Reserve. But sometimes the case becomes clearer if you even look at it in the case of a company. If your company's sitting on a stockpile of cash, you're going to hold a lot of it. A lot of them do today in the form of U.S. Treasuries. Very few of them are holding those reserves in the form of Bitcoin today. I believe that is likely to change.
So getting back to what Andrew Holmes had talked about in the beginning, I want to play this clip for you. The question is, not only is it a great store of value, a good strategic reserve, hedge against inflation, but could it possibly even reduce the U.S. debt?
First of all, we have $9.3 trillion of federal debt that's coming due within the next 12 months. The interest rates on that debt have dramatically increased over the last 3 years, and refinancing it at today's interest rates will create an extremely profound burden on taxpayers. Secretary Bessent has indicated his strong desire to spread future Treasury issuances across the duration curve, avoiding the risk of putting everything in the short end of the curve, as Secretary Yellen did. President Trump and Secretary Bessent have also indicated their strong interest in lowering 10-year interest rates, which have an important effect on consumer finance, mortgage finance, auto loans, as well as the federal interest expense. President Trump created the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, and in particular directed the United States government to identify revenue-neutral ways to acquire Bitcoin. By creatively integrating Bitcoin into Treasury bonds, I would like to suggest that we can significantly reduce the borrowing costs of the federal government and defease the debt. And in particular, I would like to propose that for Americans that purchase these bonds, that they be tax-free from both interest as well as capital gains, and offer a very strong way for American families to rebuild wealth. So what's the program? It's actually pretty straightforward. $2 trillion bond issuance, 10% of the bonds go for the purchase of Bitcoin, 90% go for other government purchases. Per $100, $10 buys Bitcoin. The interest rate on a current pay basis is much lower than the normal interest rate, only 1% per year. This dramatically reduces the current interest expense of the federal government. At the conclusion of the bond, in this case a 10-year bond, investors are due a compound annual growth rate of 4.5% on a senior basis. That's equivalent, roughly, to the 10-year interest rate on Treasuries today. And after they receive 4.5% on a senior basis, they're entitled to 50% of the Bitcoin upside, and the United States government retains the other 50% of the Bitcoin upside.
So as you guys know on this channel, I am a mostly Bitcoin channel. I used to talk about more altcoins years ago. For me now, the main focus is just Bitcoin. I think it's more important to focus on what I believe matters. Yes, there's other great technologies. I do use Ethereum and Solana and Tron and, believe it or not, Binance Chain, I use that too, but it's mostly for stable coins. But at the end of the day, if it's not really for immediate transfer or short-term speculation, the major player, the major holding for me and for what I would suggest for most people is Bitcoin. But I can understand why. If you look at the last 90 days of some of these top altcoins, we have 35% going all the way down to about 85%, dog with hat, bonk, obviously Floki, Pepe, you've seen a lot of the memes down here. So yeah, if your portfolio is down 85, 90%, I could totally understand why someone might be depressed right now and think that it's over. But if you're holding Bitcoin primarily, it doesn't really feel that way. In fact, I have not really connected or resonated with a lot of the panic that's been going on. I sleep very well at night because I know that Bitcoin is the secure place to be parking, if you're in crypto. And here's another thing, right? You have net unrealized profit. So like Tang points out, a lot of these metrics are back to the levels that we saw at around $50,000 Bitcoin with the run up to 100K. Not to mention that we never even reached profitability levels that would justify a macro top. Looks and feels like the last few weeks of chop with most of the downside already behind us. And I would agree that there is possibility for some more potential downside, but I think the majority of that downside move is most likely over. Again, unless something crazy happens, like there's a lot going on with the tariffs wars and, people moving into treasuries and ditching equities. I don't know, possibly that could have some form of an effect. I'm sure it would. But the markets are incredibly oversold, in my opinion, at this point. Although, what did my opinion matter? It doesn't really matter, right? I'm just a guy on the internet. But I would think that if you had been sitting on the sidelines and you were looking to dollar cost average into Bitcoin, this is like the next to greatest time. You know what I mean? Like, could we get a $60,000 Bitcoin? Possible, not that likely. I can show you why on the charts, because we consolidated for like over 8 months in that area. But, you know, if we just hop in, when we go into these cycles, and I know everyone laughs at me for using the super guppy, but I do love this very simple indicator. You could see that when we go into the green, we tend to stay there for a very long time, right? And if you just compare, you know, the distances that we've had here, for example, this was 826 days, okay? This cycle was 924 days. The previous cycle, and I'm going to exclude the COVID crash because that was an anomaly, let's be honest with you. That was the 50% crash in the day, which was ridiculous. You know, that was about 994 days. So, you know, ballpark, you're looking at around sort of 800 to 900-esque days, you know, and zooming in right here from start to where we are right now, we've only been doing this for about 480 days. So statistically, this would be the shortest, most pathetic bull market, that we have ever seen. And, you know, you're just not seeing those market tops. Again, the area of interest is right here around this sort of 70, 71,000 area. You know, when you have a move like this, where you move up this fast and you don't build any kind of base or any kind of structure, there's nothing, literally nothing going on right here, that is when you tend to come down into that area, possibly rebuild the base. You know, we can start coming up. We can even have a fake out, you know, build some more down here. People say, oh no, you know, we lost structure, right? And then the next thing you know, we can come down, back up, whatever. So obviously I'm not Nostradamus. I have no idea what the market is going to do actually, you know, just take it day by day. But this is a constructive pattern. This is an expanding pattern. And it, you know, as these continue to go up, you do start to put in, you know, a bit of that parabola, right? And that's where you start to lead into those extremely crazy banana moves, like they put it. The other thing to mention is that right down here, we've started capitulation on the hash ribbons. And I went over this in my previous video, but there's about an 84% hit rate for positive returns, right? When you get this buy signal. Now, obviously, this buy signal on the weekly, so we had it right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks it took to get that buy signal. Well, we literally just got the capitulation signal. So, you know, putting us out 10 weeks, you know, that could take us potentially maybe even out to May. You know, it could be a little boring, a little bit scary, but just taking the last buy signal, just as an example, if you had taken it on the week it came out, you would have had a 27% drawdown. Again, Bitcoin is known for these 20 to 30% drawdowns. But if you had held, or at least started dollar cost averaging at that point, you know, then you were up 59, almost 60%. And if you actually were able to somehow, you know, scalp that bottom, you'd be up around 120%. So, you know, it all is just a matter of patience, and patience is something that people in crypto clearly do not have. When you have individuals who are trading meme coins and they're like, oh my goodness, like this coin is pumping. I got in 2 hours too late. When buying a coin 2 hours or 4 hours after, you know, people are talking about it, and that's too late, that's not healthy. That's a goldfish mentality, right? So you have to be patient. That is part of the game. Just the same way that you get these massive, massive moves. Don't forget, last year, we spent over 70% of the year ranging in, you know, the high 50s to the low 70s, right? It was boring. And then what happened? Right when everyone stopped paying attention, boom, 100K and above. It's going to happen again. That's what always happens, right? These markets are designed to just mess with your emotions. But I think if you're focusing more on Bitcoin, you're not going to be as emotional. The crazy thing about all of this is, despite everyone freaking out, we are still just ranging between the 4.236, which is around that 73, and our 1.618 target, which we've had literally for over a year on this channel, at 102. when you hit something like this, okay, look at this. The next area up here is 155,000. So the same way that we tend to consolidate in these areas, like for example, between the 786 right here, right, and the 4.23, which is kind of where we're coming down to right now, you know, you had, look at this. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 going on 8 months consolidation. Well, we're doing the same thing between this level and this level, right? So it's not uncommon to see some bouncing around and structure. This is what we do. We build structure, we move up. We build structure, we move up. We build structure, we move up. Now, of course, we don't go up forever. Then eventually, we do come back down, right? But we're not at that point just yet. And I don't think that we're at a cycle top. I could be wrong, but history would say that that's not the case. And until we start seeing some negative crossovers, something bearish like this where you have the 21 exponential moving over the 50 or the 50 starting to really lose itself, because don't forget, you can have a lot of, fake outs below this area, which, did we even have one? Well, we had one back here, a little bit, right? A little bit one right here. And actually, this move, we haven't even touched it yet, right? So as long as these are maintaining, still where they're going like this, this can even come down super close, as long as it doesn't really flip it, because this is a lower moving average, then you can't deny that this is still constructive patterns. I mean, this is not destructive. This is not bearish patterns. It's, the moving averages are showing us that the overall strength is still moving to the upside. And we might even potentially be forming, a new wave right here, which could suggest that we do come down maybe a little lower for sure. But that would probably present a buying opportunity, something like right here, right? Where, Bitcoin was up at around 69. We came down to around 51. And, then we had that move to the upside. So again, I know this video is a little bit long. I haven't made a lot of videos, so I like to cover a lot in these videos when I do make them. So I think ultimately, I just like to remind a lot of people that, again, if you're in the altcoins, I can't help you. We don't really talk about altcoins. I don't pay attention to a lot of the altcoins, really, honestly. So Bitcoin, I think, is fine right now, and everything should be all right. And if you guys obviously do want to trade, you can use some of the links below. I have all these different bonuses. We have like 70,000 in bonuses. Meta Signals, we do also have, which is a Signals. You can join the Discord absolutely free. And if you want, you can try it out. You can even use some paper trading if you'd like. And again, if you guys are interested, do check out, like I said, over here on LevX, we do have some of these other exclusive updates. Like I said, if you guys are interested in these updates, like for example, this was posted before this video today. So if you are interested again in that, you can use the link below. It's free. You don't even have to trade. It's just basically when you use the link, you are automatically subscribed to my content, which you can't get otherwise. It's like an exclusive thing that you guys get for doing that. So if you're interested, that's more free content for you. You can also follow me over on X. Make sure you get subscribed here if you haven't. I do have a free Telegram group, although I'm not in it as often, but there are a lot of people that just, we do talk crypto over there as well. And if you do want to learn how to trade, I got some tutorials for you right here, right now. But at the end of the day, guys, I think crypto as a whole is going to be okay. I can't say that for every altcoin, but definitely Bitcoin, I would be taking advantage of, the dips before it's another one of those ETF situations, and then we're at another all-time high. So until next time, guys, stay crypto, and of course, peace out.